Oh, okay.
Go
Yep.
ahead.
You did. Oh, you added or, that's great.
We're calling the meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, August 28th, 2026. We're here in the Ann Community Center or Conference Center?
Business Center.
Business Center, excuse me. All right. This is the Governance Committee meeting. Present is the Board Chair, Truman Tolfree, Board Member Red King,
I missed that.
Howard from our County Ledge representative, myself, Norman Jones, Committee Chair. Call the meeting to order. And first order of business is I need a motion to accept the meeting minutes from our March 17th committee meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. First item, topic of business is to review the UTEP. I know there's a working session with the actual team from the executives structure. We'd like to go over that and give us an update.
Thank you. On Thursday last week, staff convened to talk through some of the changes that the governance committee has addressed so far and established some sense of how these changes might be reflected in a UTEP update. There are some items where we're still seeking the board's input. First and foremost, so in December, the board adopted the housing study that was produced by MRB Group and some recommended new pilot schedules for certain types of multifamily housing projects. Those pilot schedules are not reflected in our existing uniform tax exemption policy, but moving forward, we would like to adopt those. So that's a straightforward first item is bringing the Premier Housing Plus, Enhanced Housing Plus, and Housing Plus pilot schedules into our existing UTEP. And then there are a few other items, including tweaking how we negotiate and work with solar developers on potential pilot conversations. Renewable energy projects have been kind of a tricky item for us, so we'll want to talk through that. We don't necessarily need to get to that today. There's an interest in establishing a pilot schedule to help attract a grocery store to food deserts in the city of Rochester. The city of Rochester's pilot review committee and their Office of Neighborhood and Business Development is talking to us a little bit about that. And then looking at our existing pilot schedules, Jobs Plus, Enhanced Jobs Plus, Lease Plus, and Green Jobs Plus, as well as shelter rent. There are a few items that we want to address with those existing menu items. First and foremost, taking what is technically a 9-year pilot, making it a true 10-year pilot, as well as Green Jobs Plus. We rarely see projects coming to us seeking a Green Jobs Plus abatement, and it's our understanding that this is because actual LEED certification is pretty expensive and onerous to obtain. So instead of requiring a project owner to obtain LEED certification, we can look for some minimum LEED criteria to be met and seek that they at least meet certain LEED standards to make them eligible for a Green Jobs Plus pilot schedule. And finally, we want to talk through process because these changes will require the Industrial Development Agency to confer with the taxing jurisdictions and seek their buy-in. And so we want to talk about ways in which we can do that. So that's a high-level run-through of what we want to discuss today, starting with the housing pilot schedules and baking those schedules into our existing UTEP.
Okay, thank you. So, Counselor.
Yes.
Whatever we do, it has to be legal, so can you just give us a little input on the impacts of these different measures?
So we'll have to amend our policy, and the law doesn't prescribe, and we've talked about this a bit, the law doesn't dictate how we go about doing that, some agencies are going through this exercise of their governance committee, making a recommendation to the board's adopting it, and they're changing their UTEP, that's it. Others are doing what the law used to require, which is holding a public hearing to review the changes with the public. And you would make sure the various taxing jurisdictions were aware in particular, and so they could have an opportunity to attend, see the changes, and comment orally or in writing. And others are, in addition to the public hearing, distributing the changes to the taxing jurisdictions in like a red line or if it's readable or some format that's legible. Submit written comments or come to the public hearing. So it's whatever we want to do. We heard from the committee previously that wanted to go the route of transparency and soliciting feedback, but also knowing the direction in which we want to go as the agency. And so we'll take the feedback to the best we can into what your vision is as the committee.
How hard would it be to do a little bit of all of the above?
I don't think it'll be hard at all.
In terms of
Just
soliciting public input?
Public input, public hearing,
Yeah.
and sending something out to the tax.
Right, so we'll do all of it because I think you pointed this out previously, transparency and communication in these kind of changes is key. And we'll get feedback. Some of it will be helpful. Some of it will be inapplicable and academic and beyond the charge of this agency. And we'll weed through the comments and take what aligns with what the committee wants to do.
And do you need board presence when you're doing those public hearings? Do we need to be there, or would it be helpful?
It would be helpful. You don't have to be. We live stream, so you could certainly watch the live stream.
But if you guys are gonna be there, you know.
We will of course be here.
Yeah, I mean, having Brett there would be, you know, important. Me, Truman, if we can, just to support that, say, guess what? We're here, and these decisions are informed decisions, so.
And to the extent a board member wants to attend this or any other public hearing, we are not there to answer questions unless they're clarifying questions. We're there to just collect comments. So you don't have to feel that you're coming and you're on the spot and you need to answer questions. We're just there to collect the comments.
Thank you. I think, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but I think it's a sound point. Comment?
No, listen, I defer to your expertise, Brett's and Howard's expertise as it relates to how we roll it out to the public. You have much more experience in that regard than I do, so I rely on your guidance.
Howard?
How have you rolled out policies before?
So we have not updated our uniform tax exemption policy since 2012, so I myself have not had an experience doing this kind of engagement with the taxing jurisdictions pertaining to COMIDA pilot schedules. I know that Harris Beach Mertha does this all the time with other IDA clients, so maybe you can talk about different ways that other IDAs approach this.
Depends on the IDA, where they're situated. In terms of this IDA, when we've adopted other policies that do have an impact on pilots, for example, we had a housing policy that impacted our pilots. The board just adopted it.
Yeah, I think you adopt and then you tell. Then you put it out to all the organizations, and if you want to allow organizations to ask questions, set a time when they can do that.
So,
I mean, I don't know if you need to do some kind of an event.
yeah, no, I think for certain jurisdictions, you're gonna have to do it. Go out there and tell them what's going on, because if you allow someone else to tell your story,
No, you can't do that.
you're not telling your story.
Right.
And you have a very powerful story to tell here. And you should talk about where we're at, the steps we've taken to get to this point, and show that it was well thought out and there's a process involved. It wasn't just pulling numbers out of the sky. We have a process and a structure.
Yeah, you might want to consider doing a press conference with the theme being the changes, invite the media, have a very clear handout of what you're doing, why you're doing it.
I think a public hearing, you know, this is, you know, this is something where we're being transparent, we're informing the public, we're letting the public know what's going on, we're talking to the jurisdictions. If the jurisdictions wanna have a press conference, that's up to them. But what we're doing as the organization, we're saying,
Yeah,
this is what's going on, we wanna make sure that you are hearing it from us, we're telling you the story. And I think that's so important, that you're letting them know what's going on, so.
Yeah, what I've heard from you in the past, so again, I'm learning from you guys on this, right? And so there are two forms of communication that need to happen. One, there's one with the jurisdictions, and two, the broader public. But my interpretation of what you've said historically, Norm, is that you're much more sensitive to making sure that the jurisdictions are on board and making sure that we communicate with them proactively.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, if you think about this in terms of cadence, I think it's maybe staff reaching out, socializing the concept of a change with the jurisdictions that we think may be most sensitive to something like this, getting their soft buy-in and building a quote-unquote coalition of the willing, and to the extent that we have them on board. At that point, I don't necessarily know if we need a televised broadcast to announce it to the public. I think we just issue a notice of a meeting, right? Whatever we're required to do, and allow that to be the public notification. But I think the most sensitive part of it is making sure that the taxing jurisdictions are on board with the change.
And what struck me was last week's meeting, those two speakers that stood up, they read the housing study and they read the UTEP and they referenced that, they talked about that. And I was saying, wow, people are reading what you're putting out. So when you have your process, you have to make sure you have a structure to the process and you can justify everything that you did.
Can I put a shine on that a little bit?
Okay.
So those individuals are involved with the climate action coalition, and they approached the county seeking more information about how we're implementing the climate action plan. And I was asked to speak with them, and I did talk to them about our existing UTEP. I talked to them about the Green Jobs Plus being in our existing UTEP. And they were aware of the housing study and because that's been covered in the news. So you're right that they're reading, but it is stemming from concerted and proactive engagement and education. And so they're not necessarily picking up on this information on their own out in the wild. We are having conversations with them and helping to guide them to the resources that will.
There's two issues that people come to the county legislature now when we have our ledge meeting: climate and housing. And I will say this, that for the most part, they have 50% of the knowledge. The other 50% is not based on fact. So how do you get the real information out there? And I'll just give you an example of 1 year in my district. We had to raise the levy at the end of the summer because the assessor never told us the amount of new property that had come online. So we had to raise the levy significantly, like over 10%. And people need to understand that this was only because the tax base grew large, and we had 2 forums. We invited taxpayers to come so we could explain to them what we were doing. And that helped.
Education, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Strategic communication.
So we tell our story.
Yes, and people aren't always gonna wanna hear what you're saying, and you're always gonna face questions and critique, but transparency is important.
I've been to meetings. Okay.
Many won't understand, but some will.
Any other discussion on this
Right.
one? So we're good with that, changing the, adding the housing plus, the enhanced housing plan plus, and the premier housing plan into the UTEP. And should I request a motion from the committee to do that, or how should we proceed with it?
I think we don't need to do individual motions. Once we have all of the changes, we can do a
Right.
motion to accept the changes, and then I'll
Okay.
make them, or we'll make them, and you'll look at them.
Okay.
So we can move on to, there's not a whole lot to say about renewable energy, but we might as well just take things in order.
Gee. I'm gonna breathe a little bit, because energy as a whole is an issue. We talked about some of the reasons why people want to stay. We had that discussion earlier, why people want to come to Rochester and stay in the region. One of the reasons why they're leaving the region, why they can't do things, is because we can't provide energy source. And I don't know where we're at with that, or how we're moving with that.
It's a big conversation for, we could have multiple meetings to talk about that. And unfortunately, RG&E would probably have to be at the table because they play a role.
So our involvement is limited to solar and wind. We don't get into wind. That's for our rural counties. Like Steuben County does a tremendous amount of wind projects. I don't think we've ever been approached with a wind project, and I'm not aware of a wind project in the county, but there could be.
I think Hamlin, years ago, they wanted to do some wind projects in the lake, and I think it just ended. I never heard the ending.
Yeah, and then offshore wind is a whole other discussion.
You go to the lake, you gotta go through the Army Corps of Engineers. And,
Right.
Are you close to your counterpart in Genesee County
Yes.
with the solar, the size of the solar farm that they have grown there? That's Batavia, right, Genesee County?
Yeah.
It's massive,
Massive.
massive.
And there are counties that have been very involved in solar, Genesee County being one of them, a lot in Tompkins County as well, much more involved than we have been. So the brief history is that, COMIDA was not involved in solar pilots at all under the previous administration, and that was a decision made by the board at that time. Unofficially. We have a renewable energy policy. It sits outside of our UTEP. It calls for a per megawatt charge that we used at the time, what was a standard charge. What we've learned over the last few years is that the taxing jurisdictions have been doing solar on their own. And that's under a section of the real property law that allows solar developers to seek the exemption as of right under law if the municipality does not opt out of the exemption. The exemption is fully exempt for 15 years, the solar installation. Full exemption, zero taxes on the installation, taxes on the land for 15 years. So the bottom line is, and we're sort of in, we're sort of not, because taxing jurisdictions, by and large, if they're doing solar in Monroe County, they're doing that on their own. We can get involved, but the difference between, and I'm only giving you this background so that you, to demonstrate, that we don't need to spend much time here. If municipalities can do it on their own, it's administered under law. The property stays on the taxable roll section 1, it gets the exemption, either 100% exemption or whatever the taxing jurisdiction negotiates per megawatt. The school, town, county all negotiate their own pilots. It's 3 separate pilots. We're not involved. If COMIDA were to get involved, we have to take a leasehold interest in the property. We move it off of roll section 1, we move it to roll section 8, and that's how we provide the exemption. By doing so, the taxing jurisdictions can no longer use the as of right exemption under the property law because we've taken that property off the tax rolls. So if you have one municipality raising their hand and saying, COMIDA, we want you involved, and another one saying, no, we don't, we got it, we're on our own, we're good, we really can't get, it's very difficult for us to get involved because we'll move the property, we'll mess up the taxing jurisdiction that wants to do it on their own to help the taxing jurisdiction doesn't. So very rarely are we having projects come to us saying, hey, COMIDA, we all want you involved.
It completely
So,
upsets the apple cart.
For that limited instance, and I'm sorry if that didn't make sense.
It's convoluted, but go ahead.
In the limited instance that COMIDA is actually involved in a solar project, we would like to give broad authority to ANA to work with the taxing jurisdictions on a pilot up to 14 years under the terms that the taxing jurisdictions would be comfortable with. So whatever the per megawatt charge is they want, ANA can negotiate it. So the idea is the UTEP will cover solar, it'll give the executive director the authority to negotiate the per megawatt charge for up to 15 years with input from the taxing jurisdictions. That's all we're asking for.
What they do in Genesee County,
Genesee County is
doing it by themselves.
administering the pilots on behalf of the taxing jurisdictions. So they are getting involved.
I'll give you a small example just to like help you understand the legalese. There's a local developer that approached us seeking to apply for a pilot. They had already gone through approvals with at least one taxing jurisdiction to get what Rachel's referring to is called a 487 pilot, the municipal pilot structure that allows for solar projects to get 15-year full abatement. So they'd already sorted that out with the local taxing jurisdiction, and then they came to Monroe County, and Monroe County Real Property said, oh no, you need to talk to ANA and COMIDA. And we had a conversation, and no, COMIDA doesn't apply in this case because you're going the 487 route. So it triggered a separate conversation where Monroe County Real Property, Monroe County Finance had to engage. The county had to have a conversation about signing off on a 487 for the county. There was a separate conversation with the school district, so it's complicated. But there are other cases where a project owner might be doing a project in an area where the taxing jurisdiction is opted out of real property tax law 487. And so that solar developer might still want property tax abatements, and their only option in that case would be to come to an industrial development agency. So they would come to us, we would negotiate, and it would be in our UTEP, and there's an additional requirement that we instituted a few years ago where because solar projects don't create a lot of jobs, we're asking for a $25,000 fee that's paid into workforce development programs.
In addition to
the
standard
existing standard fees. So that's kind of the differentiation. So section 1 is your standard, taxable
Where all of our
property.
houses
Yeah.
sit.
Yeah, so with that particular project, if they were to come to us and apply for a COMIDA pilot, it would completely render useless the negotiation that they had already done with that taxing jurisdiction. So totally separate options for solar project owners.
Okay, you're talking solar, we didn't talk wind.
We don't really
Yeah,
do a lot of wind
We're not
here.
gonna see. Maybe
Doesn't
we'll
mean
see
we
one.
can't.
And
Maybe in here.
And that's why we're calling it renewable energy.
what about microgrids or anything like that?
I ain't going near that.
There's a lot more to renewables than, but that, I think we should make sure that we just give the executive director enough latitude to deal with issues as they come up.
We're just, right, exactly. We're not seeing it with enough frequency to put anything more concrete in our UTEP about it, other than it's renewable energy, whatever the law defines as renewable energy, and ANA has the authority to negotiate. And then, of course, it comes to the board for approval like any other pilot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But this way, we don't have to deviate, we can negotiate, bring the pilots to the board to the extent we ever see them, we're done.
Good,
Great,
Absolutely.
thank you.
good.
Yeah,
All right, the next is,
14 years.
freshman row.
yes, so again,
14
this,
years.
the only other industrial development agency in New York State that has a actual pilot schedule in a UTEP that's focused specifically on grocery stores is the New York City, the industrial development agency serving NYC, they call it NYC Fresh.
Mhm.
So this, you can take it or leave it, Fresh Monroe, just something that came up in our brainstorming session. Myself, I'm guilty of saying, hey, why don't we just call it Fresh Monroe? But the city's Office of Neighborhood and Business Development has approached COMIDA about how do we get more strategic about attracting a grocery store operator to the city, to the food deserts in the city. Last week was great. COMIDA approved a small concept grocery store project to go into the Sibley building. That's a small project, startup. We're talking about with instituting a program like this, it would be helping a grocer operator make the numbers work on locating a project in areas of need in the city of Rochester. And so we have here in the suggestions, that a potential abatement for Fresh Monroe could be up to 20 years. There's some great data, publicly accessible data out there about where food deserts are located. Standard is, where a resident lives more than a mile away in an urban area from a grocery store. So it's essentially, it's a long pilot runway with potentially a generous abatement schedule, to help an Aldi or a Price Chopper or something, make the numbers work to select a site in a food desert in the city. And we did have, Robin and I had a great conversation facilitated by the city's now officially Commissioner of Neighborhood and Business Development, Eric Fish. He connected us to a gentleman in Atlantic City who, they have a different, it's not an IDA, it's like it's an entity that the revenues come in from the casinos, and they leveraged their role as a public authority to get involved in purchasing a site, retrofitting a site, and then working with a grocer operator on making it possible for them to locate in this grocery store location. It's a very positive success story, not a model that we could replicate based on what capabilities we can bring to bear, but an interesting example of a success that came out of sort of a public-private partnership approach to grocery store business attraction, and looking to the NYC Fresh model gave us some inspiration as to how we might institute something like this. We can't really call it a successful program until it actually bears fruit and like bringing an Aldi to, you know, somewhere in the city, but, goal would be to look to the city's pilot review committee and neighborhood and business development, say, what are you guys interested in, what are you okay with in terms of a pilot schedule and an abatement schedule? If it's up to 20 years, what does the percentage abatement look like? And then we'll take that, and then maybe the city and other partners can go engage with decision makers in the grocery store community about, hey, we've got this pilot schedule we want to talk to you about, and it can be a chit or a carrot that we can leverage to attract someone. So that's the long and short of it.
I'm excited about it. It's a great tool for municipalities to use. One thing is lacking downtown. There's two things that's lacking that's hurting our downtown. One is the hotel, and the other is not having Angie's Hotel.
There's progress.
It's progress. It looks.
It needs to get done, but, I
and
don't know if we need more hotel rooms downtown, to be honest with you. Everyone continues to say that, but if you take a look at the metrics for the ADR and the occupancy for the hotels that we have, they're underutilized. And it's not because there isn't high quality, you know. Well, no, some need to be like redone, you know, there are property improvement programs, you know, granted, but, like, adding more hotels in downtown, like, I don't think makes a ton of sense.
I think his.
Not from a business standpoint.
Right. Yeah.
The convention center would argue they need a 300-room hotel room just to remain competitive and viable, and they're publicly subsidized, so that's a whole different can of worms.
That was just one side of it. The other side is a grocery store. Downtown, you go to downtown Philly, there's an Aldi.
Sure.
Downtown San Francisco, there's Aldi's. Downtown Baltimore, you see it. There are grocery stores all over the place. And it makes sense to have it. I think it changes the residency downtown. Because right now, our downtown has changed from hotels and businesses become more resident oriented.
Absolutely, right, with the housing pilot schedules, we're trying to encourage more residential development, mixed use, bring more density, residential density downtown. A grocery store would be great as an amenity. Downtown is just one neighborhood, right, in the city though, that is considered a food desert. There's lots of others. So with the city's input and blessing, for us to stand something like this up, it would put us in a position where we could, work together with other partners and try to attract the right project to the right location.
Actually, Aldi's did the first grocery store in a food desert on Lake Avenue. It was their first Aldi's in Rochester. It was on Lake, yeah, it was on Lake Avenue,
I didn't know that was the first one.
the first one in Rochester. It was a tough part of town, so, and it's there, it's been there
Still,
for
yeah.
over 25 years.
It's actually nice, it's a nice Audis over there.
On Lake Avenue? Yeah.
It's a nice site. So for this, are these specific, individual pilots that we're talking about creating, or are we just adding language to the UTEP that gives flexibility for you to,
The latter.
okay,
We'd like to
so
do the
fine,
latter.
yeah, great.
So all these are good. I mean, we're just going to have discussions on it. I mean, the enhanced job plus and
At
the,
what point this year?
the lease plus and the green jobs. Basically, we all, we do have a agreement on. The green job, taking it out of lead, I think it's so important, because doing a lead building, you ever do a lead building?
No, there's one,
I have.
ESL.
No, our Rochester Waterworks.
Oh.
The first lead building in Rochester. We were silver certified,
kidding.
and we took, this was in
First one.
2006. It was tough to do, and you don't get anything out of it, but just a little plaque.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So, I
It's
mean, I don't
expensive
know
little
that-
plaque.
I don't know if that criteria is the best criteria you wanna utilize. I think if we can just say, guess what, we're gonna,
You meet lead standards, or if you're close enough to meeting lead standards. And that recommendation came to us from, the folks that developed the climate action plan for the county. And I know the city's climate action plan predates the county's, but they said, hey, the reason why you're not getting a lot of bites on your Green Jobs Plus schedule is because of how onerous it is to get lead certification. But if you just modify the language to say, you meet certain standards, then you will see more, renewable project activity. You'll see more companies coming and seeking this schedule, to support their renewable investments.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
yeah.
Okay.
So I think, Truman, to go back to your question, to be clear, we're adding specific schedules for housing.
Right,
We are going to modify Green Jobs Plus to have some sustainable green criteria that projects can meet to be eligible for that. So we would be keeping that schedule. So now we've got the 3 housing, the Green Jobs Plus, so that's 4, and then Jobs Plus, 5.
Right.
The open items before the committee are, at what point should we be negotiating out of Jobs Plus? At what point does Anna's authority to negotiate a pilot up to X number of years, so that way the years are in there, we're deviating less, at what point does that authority kick in?
Right.
And I think before, when we had looked at the enhanced Jobs Plus, the lease plus, we'll hold on shelter rent for now, they were very outdated benchmarks. It was
No.
15 million in investment in the creation of 100 jobs and like arbitrary numbers.
so we're getting rid of that, right, the enhanced? Is that
Yeah,
sunset
so-
the schedule,
we're
so that's ongoing?
What?
We're suggesting to get rid of it.
Yeah, suggesting getting rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
And same with this grocery store idea. Like, we're not suggesting that we're adding a new pilot schedule. What we're gonna do is market areas in the city in which
Yeah.
grocery stores could go, and then Anna has the authority to negotiate for that.
Yeah, I
So
like that.
it's the benchmarks at which we're negotiating. At what threshold of investment or type of project are we saying, you're super special, you should have something better than Jobs Plus?
Yeah,
That's what we are asking the board to weigh in on.
Okay.
That's what we're asking you.
We're providing you with some flexibility, latitude to get the job done.
Right, and this is very similar to what is on the books with other IDAs. Like, I always go back to the Steuben County example.
Yeah, I mean, their UTEPs do not lay out pilot schedules like ours do. They just say the executive director has the authority to negotiate a pilot up to 15 years,
And then we negotiate.
and then they negotiate the pilot.
yeah.
It's not considered a deviation then.
So, if we keep jobs plus in, right, that we're saying there are
Their
certain
standard.
projects that just get the jobs plus. You come in, you apply, you get jobs plus. At what point are you not a jobs plus project?
Where do you?
Is it your cost, your benefit to incentive ratio is above a certain threshold? Your job creation is above a certain threshold, or your
Capital investment.
capital investment, it's probably capital investment.
What is the state regulation, like, is it $5 million or something? There's a number where it triggers X number of dollars worth of public benefit triggers, like the
Prevailing wage.
prevailing wage.
30% of your project costs are coming from public funds. And it's
Okay, so it doesn't specify like a number
it was projects above 5 million.
above 5 million.
But that's pretty low.
Arbitrary
Yeah.
and low, yeah, okay. Cause we could assign 5 million or 10 million or
Yeah, I mean,
20 million, but we would just be spitballing.
because the reality is, we do jobs plus pilots all year, every month, that's what we do. Except for Amazon, Fairlife, Lycycle. There's one coming up in Fairport. So whenever the state gets involved, that's when we get into special territory where we're negotiating, when the state is
Competitive projects,
these
So-
competitive projects that
where they're looking at other states.
or other areas of the state.
How do we articulate the ability to give her that latitude?
Exactly.
That's what we're
Exactly.
trying to, yeah, that's what we're trying to crack.
That's a,
So an idea would be, what does the state look at when they get involved, is usually, is one place to look.
The state looks at, is there a potential for this to go to another state? And if there is a potential for the decision maker to take the project elsewhere, the state will engage. That's a basic,
well,
like, table stakes
I
threshold.
think. it
Or to
should-
leave Monroe County.
Or
we would
leave
want
the
to
state,
stay.
right,
that's-
exactly.
That's exactly right.
Or to attract them to Monroe County if they're.
Leave Monroe County, attract to Monroe County, or not do the project at all, and stay in Monroe County and not increase, the actual jobs or their footprint in Monroe County.
I think it's, you're not gonna like this, but I'm just gonna say it. I think it's going to be, you'll know it when you see it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's the pornography.
Like, it's the pornography example, like, you know it when you see
Supreme
it.
Court, you know it when you see it, yeah.
Moses, what are you talking?
Wasn't that a Supreme Court?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know it when you see it.
What about, so isn't there something about all those bills
Look it
that, what's a common thread for all of those types of projects? Is it that there is some form of public-private partnership where sometimes?
It's huge job creation, huge capital investment. We're competing with another state, or we're
Or county.
competing with another county.
So then, generally speaking, I'm fine with like language that, well, no, that's not true. I'm generally not fine with language that is like sufficiently broad to give anyone like huge latitude to do whatever they want to do. But I trust you all, so I think it's probably okay. However, I think it probably does make sense to think around how we can put some like
Guardrails around.
yeah, just a little bit,
Yeah,
right?
well,
Something.
we all trust each other, but like, we're not all
Yeah.
necessarily gonna be in these spots,
Right,
right?
forever.
Like,
So, I mean, there needs to
this
be,
is a living document.
there needs to be something, and so maybe it's, you know, competitive, like critical infrastructure or critical something,
Transformative.
right, transformative projects, right? You know, if we think about the language, and again, you know, it could still be that, you know, when you see a language, but at least if we place some kind of adjective right in front of it, it's just not, well, this is it, but it's not transformative, right? It needs to be something that moves the bar,
Yep.
I guess.
Yeah.
As opposed to not. So, like, what kind of adjectives do we need to have to make sure that people actually know what you know when you see it actually means?
I think that the most straightforward approach there is the cost benefit analysis and the ratio, the benefit ratio that we look at. So, in a project
That's an after. You need to know what your abatement is to
Yeah.
get that.
We can do it in the process. The thing is, the bigger the project, the bigger the
Yeah.
the benefit package tends
Mhm.
to get, so that pulls down your ratio. So it's gonna be multiple data points. Do you wanna bring up the lobbyist example?
Where do you want me to go with that?
To Truman's point about there needing to be some guardrails, and Allison would say this. Everyone thinks their project is super special.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, sure.
yeah.
And those who have the ability, and we're seeing more and more of it, hire lobbyists
Mhm.
There's
to
one in
lobby
particular. Yeah.
municipalities to then support a very generous pilot to COMIDA.
Seeing it more and more.
We're seeing it more and
Really?
more, and it's just as
Yeah, everybody's
aggressive
hiring.
as
What's
your
his name? What's the kid's
consultant
name?
and your
Yeah.
lobbyists
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, Mark,
He keeps bringing, he's learned.
yeah.
So what we would say should get a jobs plus, because they just have paid for a very aggressive lobbyist, they're getting the buy-in of the taxing jurisdictions to get something more. We are not in the business of blocking that. If the host municipality wants it, then fine. But to Truman's point, we need some guardrails. To staff's point, everybody thinks their project is super special. So we have to decide what a super special
So
project
on those, what were the dollar amounts on those, the Amazon, Fairlife, those big, what were the total
So,
packages?
Those were like 500-600.
So Li-Cycle was 500 million roughly.
They each got bigger.
Fairlight was
Started
six
bigger,
hundred and
like,
fifty
was
million
660 or
initially, but
something.
we're well past 650 million.
Yeah.
But that's how much was.
Amazon's investment wasn't,
It wasn't as big
It
as
was
Li-Cycle's.
pretty big though, I mean,
it was
like,
big.
300 million?
I
It
think
drove
that's
Between
what I-
3 and
it
400
drove a
million
large
dollars.
fee.
Yeah. But in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, and the employment was also what was
Right.
so critical to
So-
me.
I think it's important, so if the cost to benefit ratio doesn't come to us in our calculator until after we input the pilot schedule, I think it's very straightforward to look at like a NAICS code and a location
Mhm.
quotient, that's federally available data. We know that like an optics company coming to us is special because that return on investment in terms of how that particular company and the industry sector it's in, how it's contributing to regional GDP and our economy, that's a strong value proposition. Whereas if it's a hotel project, or if it's a warehouse project, that's less of a net contributor to our economic strength. And I think that information has been covered in the Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council's strategic planning documents. Greater Rochester Enterprise has some information that they point to all the time on their website about where are Greater Rochester, Monroe County's economic strengths. So perhaps, we could look to those industry sectors where we have the greatest, the industry sectors where there's greatest potential for return, semiconductors, advanced manufacturing, et cetera.
Photonics.
Photonics, exactly. There's any number of ways to look at it, but I think that's kind of.
So we'll have to draft language that's sufficiently broad, but also specific enough that not everyone will qualify, but we can look at various data points, industry sector, job creation, capital investment, benefit to incentive ratio. If it's a landlord, who is their tenant? Is it a 501c such that if the 501c3 owned it, it may be wholly exempt? So this is a way to keep the property on the tax rolls versus going off. So we hear you. We'll come back with some sufficiently broad yet narrow language.
Okay.
That's what the lawyers are for, that's what they're good at.
Okay, I think we've worn this one out.
We'll come back to it.
The only other open item, and Robin and anyone else correct me if I'm wrong, is what should the job creation requirement be for Jobs Plus? Because in the negotiating world, we're negotiating everything.
Yeah.
So we're negotiating jobs. Currently, it's 10% over existing, and we spent a lot of time at our last meeting talking about how the cost, there's a cost associated with adding jobs. We're here to help creation. We need to recognize retention projects. Is 10% over existing the appropriate number for a company with existing jobs? Is it the appropriate number for when there are 0 jobs?
I think you're gonna have to come back to us with that one, on that one also. Because if you have a major company that's gonna come in and they're gonna expand, but there's other factors out there that's limiting them creating more jobs. Like, the big thing in the room is AI. AI is gonna reduce jobs, and you're gonna ask them to stay. We need you to stay, we need the company to be viable, but then we need to expand jobs, and they're reducing jobs. So it's just,
Right.
it's a real tricky one.
And
you know?
transformative investments in infrastructure oftentimes are not accompanied by significant job creation, but they're necessary. So, our NYSEDC, the kind of statewide convening group for IDAs, circulated some talking points about, data centers in particular with that in mind, and tax breaks being granted to projects that don't create a lot of jobs. It comes under criticism. However, the counterpoint to that is that the incentives, policymakers might not necessarily need to keep using jobs per dollar test. Maybe the jobs per dollar test is outdated. And I'm not saying that we should take that out of our calculus, but it's something, and we don't want to see further job loss in this community. We certainly don't want to incentivize further job loss, but many manufacturers, for example, like Ledestri, are investing in technology that's automating production lines, and it's not necessarily tied together with job creation, but it is capital investment and enhanced prosperity for a significant employer. Retention is super important, but when it comes to, Ledestri is a good example because they kept coming back to us for more benefits, and then we kept looking to them and saying, you need 10% on top of your existing employment base, but is that really fair for an existing significant employer that is growing and investing in the community? Also, too, is it fair for us to, in the case of an Amazon, when they come and apply for benefits, it's a new project, we're asking for 10% on existing, so technically for a new project, it's just one job.
Right.
In the case of Amazon, we ask them to create many more than one job, but, so it's
There's some, I think that's the question again, is providing the executive directors some flexibility and leeway on that, and how do we articulate that? I had major advancements in how we manage our solid waste since 1988. Moved from 2 men on the truck to 1 man on the truck to semi-automated to fully automated. Went from 200 people to 125, now to 78, and everything's automated. I asked for a lot of money to do it, but at the end of the day, we reduced the workforce, but we remained sustainable and in the ballgame and kept our dollars, our costs down. And that's what these good organizations are gonna do. So they're gonna come and ask for support, but then we penalize them for not adding jobs. It's kind of, I don't know how you do it. Truman, I need that brain of yours.
yes.
What's that? No, listen.
What do you think?
You're smarter than me in this stuff, by the way. All of you guys.
No, but.
So I just wrote down some stuff. So, what it sounds like we need, really like I think in terms of frameworks, right? So we need a framework for how we evaluate deals. And, what we've been talking about here today is, part of it is, sorry for these cliches, right? But, it's true. There's, part of it is an art, right? That's why we're saying that Honor needs a little discretion to be able to negotiate the best pilot to attract and retain, some of the best deals. But then there is a part of it I think is a science. That's why we have our model and why we, calculate these metrics so we can speak to, what the value add is. And so I don't know if we're going to solve the problem of what is the science part of how we evaluate these large deals today. But I do think that it's probably a question that we can pose to, I always mess up their name, is it MRBI Group? MRB Group, right? And so, what do those metrics need to look like, right? We're talking about how we solve the science part of the question. And I don't know if we need to reinvent the wheel. I'm sure there are some folks out there who have had to deal with this before. And so, I think we just, query the folks who are experts at this and ask them to give us some frameworks for how we can begin to think about and solve the problem, right? I mean, it starts with framing the question the right way and, understanding the right, I think variables to look at and to measure, and then coming up with a framework for how we should actually measure them. So, I think that's the question, and we pose it to the experts to help guide us through it.
You gotta be careful, you gotta be careful what you're gonna say ahead of time, because that may ruin the project.
Yeah.
Right.
Meaning that we never wanna set a project up for failure in their job creation requirements.
No.
So,
Like
I think
ideally,
it's
we
one
don't,
project it's one project at a time, because they're all different.
Right,
Yeah.
when you see it, every project is different. Some of the jobs being created are better quality than the other jobs, right? Like if you get $100,000 job working in an optics company versus a $50,000 job at a warehouse, are we factoring that in?
Well, the interesting thing is, as I look around the room with the ladies, the discernment means a lot. What you've been doing has been working. And so you talk about asking, you can get in trouble asking questions, but there's a way to do it. And you guys have been very successful with doing that.
Yeah.
And so it's gotta be, one project at a time, and the way that, it isn't just filling out a form, it's some of the questions that they're not gonna know exactly why you're asking, you're good at that.
Thanks, Brett. I like, Truman, your point about building a framework. We've talked in the past about a rubric or some sort of a scoring matrix. Maybe something like that could apply.
Yeah.
We'd have to think through it, but yeah.
great discussion. Anything else?
I think that was everything, right? We already addressed off the top the, process, like sort of how we want to approach the process. We didn't touch shelter rent, but I don't know that, is that something, there's not really anything that we wanna,
I just wanna
Yeah.
add the
not, oh yeah, okay.
no term in it right now.
oh, one thing for me, just like branding, so these names for the pilot schedules, so we would be talking about eliminating or sunsetting enhanced jobs plus and lease plus, but maintaining jobs plus. The names jobs plus, enhanced jobs plus, and lease plus, and green jobs plus were brainchilds of another era and brainchildren of another administration. I don't know where they originated. I don't know what other IDAs actually brand their pilot schedules. So I guess we could take it or leave it. Certainly if we're talking about like adjusting our job creation and retention expectations, calling something a jobs plus might be a little bit of a misnomer, but that's another conversation for perhaps another day. But if we wanna take the names away or come up with something new,
This is,
something to think
I
about.
think it's time for something new.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we went through the process of study. We've done a lot. Matter of fact, the MRB group come up with some
Okay.
different, name suggestions.
We'd have to pay them,
We do? Well,
probably would.
do you have any children?
I'm sorry, this is.
Yeah,
Are you
so-
saying
we could
switch
throw
in
it
the
in.
housing
SAI
for?
first.
I'll be
Yeah,
honest
we
with
could
you,
just use
we could,
AI.
we could throw it in Claude.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll say I'll ask
it'll-
AI
it'll-
before I call somebody.
It'll spit out 100 names for us to consider in less than a second.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's it.
Sounds like they're cheaper.
See what AI has to say.
Yeah.
Okay,
Load it up.
Okay,
I know.
no other business for the governance committee? Any other business?
No, I just appreciate your time and energy.
No, this is good. This is
Great.
important. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor, aye?